what I used to say to the officers I trained at National Defense University and across the US military is you must understand who this individual is. He's a former KGB colonel. And number two, he is not interested in the status quo. If you look at what he does, whether it's in Europe, whether it's the Middle East or elsewhere, it is an anti-status quo actor who is running the Kremlin, and that's how he should be treated.
So tell us, Sebastian, people are very familiar with you telling us about American politics. The job is counter-terrorism chief. What will your priorities be in the job?
Well, securing the United States as per the president's plan and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz's from the global jihadi threat. Externally, those who are trying to infiltrate the United States, and also those who have been let into America under the borderless regime of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and then to assist our allies and our partners, such as Israel, to deal with a terrorist threat in their own backyards.
Last time around, you were an advocate of what was called the Muslim ban as a way of controlling the borders of the United States. Is that a policy that will return under you and Trump together?
There never was a Muslim ban.
Explain what the policy was then to our listeners and what the policy might be in the future.
Well, what we did at the very beginning of the first Trump administration is based upon a threat assessment which had been executed by the Obama White House. We had a temporary travel stop for 7 nations that could not verify the identity of those coming to the United States and could not guarantee whether or not they were terrorists or other types of threat. If it had anything to do with religion, we would have included the largest Muslim state, Indonesia, but we did not. So that is, again, a fake news description. It was simply a threat assessment of those nations who could not verify the identity of their citizens coming to America, and that's why we had a temporary moratorium on travel from those countries.
But you would regard, you've said this before, I believe, that profiling to a certain extent is an important part of your job. You need to work out who are the sort of people, and that would include people who are Islamists, people who are on the extreme end of Islam. And that's a category that you want to be open about stopping coming into the United States of America.
Well, if a person walks into a bank wearing a balaclava, carrying a sawed-off shotgun, they're probably a bank robber. So if a person is a subscriber to the fundamentalist jihadi ideology of groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, yes, they pose a threat to every decent person.
But your point previously was that some countries weren't checking enough before you could make that sort of judgment. So it wasn't a question of simply people looking like bank robbers. There'd be people who weren't certain either way. And I guess the question is, what are you going to do this time? Are you going to look at individual countries and say, we can't trust what is coming from those countries? Or is there another way of profiling in the next administration?
Well, I'm not sure why you're obsessing over the question of profiling. Ask the people of Israel who saw 1,200 men, women, and children murdered by jihadists. So I'm not going to reveal concrete policies of the president or the national security advisor, but ask our Jewish brethren and our friends in the Middle East. Ask those in the UK who on 7/7 and even more recently were murdered by jihadis.
How much will you have a role in discussing the future of the Middle East? Because that's there's 2 areas of conflict where everyone around the world, including in Britain, is desperately keen to see what Trump says and what does. There's the issue of Ukraine and Russia, which we can get to if you wouldn't mind. But in the Middle East, what do you feel Trump will do? He's famously a broker of deals. That place looks like a deal is very hard to find there. What's your views on what Trump will do and your own thoughts on the region?
Well, it is a benighted region. There is one functioning democracy as our partner, the state of Israel. We will support Israel. We will stand shoulder to shoulder with their duly elected Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. And as you said, when we were in the White House previously, we brought an unbelievable level of tranquility to the region with the Abraham Accords. And President Trump will revivify them with Senator Rubio as his Secretary of State and whoever he picks as his envoy to the Middle East, and with the National Security Advisor, Colonel Mike Waltz. So we're going to restart that which we built under the first administration to try and normalize the region so we don't have bloodshed anymore.
Will he be more pro-Israel than the Biden administration?
It's not difficult to be more pro-Israel than the anti-Semitic regime of the Democrat Party. Don't forget what Biden said on the back of Air Force One when he landed in Germany, coming back from the Middle East after his absolutely failed peace mission. He actually said, after the so-called IDF bombing of a hospital, which was actually bombed by the forces of the Gazan jihadis, the Hamas forces, he said on camera, and if it is the Gazans, if it is the Palestinians, they've got to learn to shoot straight, meaning the jihadis have to learn how to shoot Jews more accurately. That's the lunacy of the Democrat Party. A Kamala Harris presidential candidate who snubbed the duly elected prime minister of Israel when he came to address Congress. A Democrat Party that has in its front row people like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. These are people who've tweeted things such as Israel has hypnotized the West, and it's all about the Benjamins. It's all about the money that the Jews pump into the foreign policy circles in America. The Democrat Party is a hotbed of rank anti-Semitism, much like Labour became under Jeremy Corbyn.
And what you're saying is that this is a pro-Israel government, and yet the Abraham Accords, as you say, I mean, it's also about finding Arab allies in the region as well. So it's a kind of balance where you say, as you said, after 7/7, the advice to Israel was to kill every single one of the Palestinian militant terrorist group Hamas. God bless Israel. God bless Judeo-Christian civilization. People listening to you now will know very clearly what you feel about Israel. But there are other allies in the region that you'll want to bring with you. That's what the Abraham Accords were.
Yeah, that was 10/7, not 7/7. That was after the October the 7th attacks, not the 7/7 attacks.
No, forget
yeah, I'm absolutely clear. Decent human beings. We are in the midst of a war between civilization, the forces of civilization represented by Judeo-Christian civilization, the zenith of which is the United States, and the barbarians who wish to kill every Christian and every Jew. That is the belief of the jihadi movement, from the Ikhwan, from the Muslim Brotherhood down to Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Al-Nusra, Hamas, and Hezbollah. That is what they believe. So, yes, of course, in that war, we will work very closely with our Arab and Muslim allies in the Middle East. I have trained many of the members of the Jordanian armed forces, including the sister of the current king of Jordan. So, yeah, these countries are crucial to excising the jihadi threat from the region. So just as we did with the first tranche of the Abraham Accords, we will do so again under President Trump's second term.
Do you feel confident? I mean, you didn't last all the way through the first Trump term, Sebastian. A lot of people talk about this feels like a different administration in terms of how it's been organized and how it's been prepared for power in a way that it possibly wasn't in 2016. Do you feel confident that you'll have a working relationship with everyone, you'll get through 4 years and you'll get things done?
Well, I'm arriving because the president wants me in the building. Things were very different 8 years ago. We had treasonous, seditionist individuals inside the White House, like the then Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and others, like Colonel Vindman, who leaked classified conversations between President Trump and heads of state to the Washington Post when they were in uniform as colonels, individuals who should be in the brig right now as traitors to the U.S. Constitution. So, yes, this is a very, very different Trump administration, and we will not have seditionists inside the wire this time.
Other people who are critical of you, do you think seditionists, well, John Bolton, you know this, called you a con man. H.R. McMaster said you're not a good person to advise on national security. These are former Trump guys. They're not current Trump guys. What do you say to someone like John Bolton who says you're a con man and you can't be trusted with counter-terrorism?
John who? The man with a risible 1970s porn mustache? He's a clown who goes on CNN. I used to go on CNN as a presidential representative to destroy the fake news. John goes there because nobody else cares about him and nobody believes he is a Republican. So I don't care one whit what failures like John Bolton say about me, the president, or the 76 million Americans who voted for MAGA and America First Part 2.
Where will Trump be on Ukraine? We talked a lot about doing a deal. Can a deal be done without Ukraine sacrificing land in Crimea or the Donbass, in your view? Is that possible for a deal to be done brokered by Trump that doesn't involve Ukrainians having Russian people on their soil?
So, well, they already have some Russians on their
Well,
soil because it is not an ethnically homogenous nation. So let's be factual about the Ukraine. Number one, he is the only person who can bring peace to that part of the Eurasian landmass. He is the arch deal maker, and he will be negotiating with the heads of state of Ukraine and the Russian Federation. And I'm not going to talk about the conditions, the terms, the scenarios, because President Trump will be doing that with Colonel Waltz and with Secretary Rubio, his incoming Secretary of State. But the priority is very clear. The bloodshed must stop. We have seen a horrific war, the likes of which we haven't seen since the termination of hostilities in 1945. And President Trump has one interest: to stop the bloodshed. And if anyone can stop the bloodshed, it is the 45th and soon to be the 47th President of the United States.
And is Putin, in your view, a threat? Do you regard him as a threat to global? We talked about the threat of radical Islam. Do you regard Putin as a threat to global order?
Well, look, the Russian Federation of today is not the Soviet Union. It's a very different kind of nation-state actor. What I used to say to the officers I trained at National Defense University and across the US military is, you must understand who this individual is. He's a former KGB colonel. And number two, he is not interested in the status quo. If you look at what he does, whether it's in Europe, whether it's the Middle East or elsewhere, it is an anti-status quo actor who is running the Kremlin, and that's how he should be treated.
So it's not a battle of ideology. It strikes me that the American-Russian Soviet Union, as it was, relationship was based on an absolute conflict of ideology, capitalism versus communism. That isn't part of it in the same way. So you'd have to deal with Putin differently. He's not an ideological enemy. He may become an enemy because of his actions, but there's not a philosophy at stake here. Is that fair, do you think?
No, that's not accurate. It's not the ideology of democracy vice communism, despite the fact that this man's formative years were spent in the Soviet Union under the red banner of the communist state. If you look at his actions since becoming president, it's far more the attempt to revivify some imperial order being run out of Moscow, and some kind of nostalgia for a bygone age. It's far older an ideological concept than the Soviet Union was.
But there's still ideology there, which is
absolutely. And if you read, he's not as important as he was, say, 10 years ago, but the influence of absolute ideologues like Dugin is important to understand the way that Putin thinks today.
So just to finish up, Sebastian, what should British people make of Donald Trump and his administration?
Well, I always find it very amusing when foreigners interview me about, oh my gosh, what's he going to do and what's he going to be like? It's like, were you in a coma for the 4 years we were in the White House? I mean, the world was stable. We had no new wars. The economy of America was the biggest it had ever seen. We had incredible relations with our allies, with our friends, with London, with Jerusalem. How do people forget so rapidly how it was under President Trump? If you love your nation, then you will find common ground with President Trump. If you believe in Brexit and national sovereignty and the special relationship between 10 Downing Street and the White House, you'll be very happy at 12:01 on January the 20th, when my former boss will be reinstalled, God willing, as my future boss, and will take the oath of office standing on the steps in front of Congress. So if you were alive for the 4 years we were in the White House, then you'll know it was a golden era, and it will be even more splendiferous for the next 4 years.
Well, that's a message people can listen to. Sebastian Gorka, thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.